Here we go. Hello. Welcome to Focus on Fantasy Romance, episode number 56, a podcast where we discuss books, the genre, industry, and our geeky lives. I'm your host, Elle Klaus.
I'm Paulina Woods.
And today we have Monica Enderle Pierce.
Hello.
Yeah. Why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction?
Okay, I'm from Seattle. And I have a dog right now that's staring at me because she's driving me crazy. I just fed you, dog. Leave me alone. I write fantasy and science fiction for adults. I don't write YA. And I focus primarily on really powerful, kick-ass female characters. I like writing female characters who actually get bloody and dirty and don't fall apart and turn the reins over to the man when he walks in the room.
Sweet.
That's pretty much it.
We like kick-ass characters. How did you start writing?
I started writing after my daughter was born. My mom, I mentioned to you guys, is a children's author. And so for years and years and years, she tried to get me to write and encourage me to write, and I just couldn't. I don't know why. I tried and I'd stop and it just didn't work. And then for some reason, after my daughter was born, I suddenly got this urge to write, and I had been reading some different things. And funny story, I actually read Twilight, and I finished reading. It was the height of Twilight. I was like, whoa, what's this all about? So I read it, and I was like, oh, that's okay. I could do that. And then his little voice in the back of my head goes, yeah, prove it. I'm like, oh, shit, okay. So I started writing a novel, which was, it was okay. I ended up gutting it several times, and it turned into a dark fantasy novel that I actually do have out. But between that, the starting of that, I also wrote my first novel that actually did come out, which is science fiction, and that one's Girl Under Glass. And that one has probably done best of all my books. I find science fiction a challenge to write. I have this tendency to want to be very correct about my science, and that slows me down big time, and I end up questioning myself. So fantasy is, I think, my first love. I really enjoy writing fantasy, and I can relax more when I write fantasy. So
I like fantasy because you can make stuff up. You don't have to do all this research to make sure the science is right. You just make shit up.
I do like researching a lot. So even when I'm writing fantasy, I tend to kind of ground it a little bit in some aspects of the real world. So I'll do things like look up slang terms from the 1500s and weave those into the stories because they're just so wonderful. And nobody says things like that anymore. They don't say bollocks. Bollocks is such a good word. Why do we not say bollocks anymore?
I don't know. I love that word.
Bring it back.
Good, isn't it?
I had that when I was writing my steampunk, so I was doing some research into some slang.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. It was difficult to actually work into the narrative, but I did it.
Nice.
So it's funny that you mentioned that Twilight was what got you writing when you write kick-ass characters, because the female lead in Twilight I would not call kick-ass.
Not at all.
Was there kind of like a development arc where did you start writing like Twilight and then morph into a kick-ass character?
No, I don't actually know why Twilight was the book. I think it was just, it was cumulative over time. I have an English literature degree from UCLA, and so I have this kind of classic literature background behind me. And I think I saw this book selling, and all these people were talking about it, and I went, why is that book so compelling for so many people? So, and I picked it up. I think my daughter was about a 1.5 or 2 at the time. And I read through it, and it was like candy. It was like just pure sugar. You just consumed it, and then you were finished. And you're like, I kind of feel a little sick. And I'm not trying to be judgmental of the book or the writer, because she tapped into something that really flew for a lot of people, and more power to her for doing that. But it really kind of left me feeling empty, and I thought, well, why can't I do that? And I think it was my mother's voice that was in the back of my head going, yeah, why can't you? Shut up, Mom. And maybe it was maybe one of the parts of that, aspects of that was that she was such a kind of wishy-washy character, and that got under my skin a little bit. Because even that first book that I was working on, the character was not easily manipulated. She was not willing
passive.
to let somebody just come in and sit there and stare at her while she slept.
Oh yeah, that was creepy.
It is creepy.
But if you remember, during that time is when, isn't that the same thing when Mocking? Oh my God, what is that series called?
Hunger Games?
Hunger Games, yes.
Thank you.
I think that came out after, like later.
I think
came out
so,
after.
too.
I mean, even it's when all the little girls became heroes.
Yeah. All the teenagers were suddenly quite heroic. It was like, wow, I don't know any teenagers.
I always wondered, where's the parents? I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. If my kid was running around like that, I'd be like, sit your ass down. There's adults for this.
Why is there a man in your room staring at you while you sleep?
Right. But I prophesied one mother, no, you're not. You're going to go eat your greens.
And wasn't her dad a sheriff or something? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, he was a sheriff.
That one really, I was like, wow, that man's got no red flags at all, does he?
I don't know. I remember being a teenager and being able to get away with quite a bit. I don't think my parents really understood what I managed to get away with.
I got away with nothing.
Sometimes ignorance is bliss.
Either that or they knew and they just were like, okay, this isn't too bad.
You could be doing drugs.
There could be other things. I could be doing drugs or something.
Yeah, it's one of those pick and choose your battles things.
Exactly. So why don't you tell us about, you said Shadow in the Sun is your first fantasy novel, is that correct?
It's my first fantasy romance.
Oh, can you tell us more about it?
Yeah. So that book it came out of the idea, I wanted to kind of toss the roles up in the air a little bit. And you always hear about the knight in shining armor who comes and saves the princess. Well, I decided to make my princess the knight in shining armor, and she has to save the necromancer. And in the beginning of the book, she is reluctant to do the task that's set before her. She has to face this necromancer who's known as being quite dangerous. And he needs somebody to protect him as he's going through this transition in his magic, changing phases and becoming weak before he becomes stronger. And so she ends up at his citadel, and oh God, they get snowed in because there's this huge blizzard. And that's part of the evil in the book. I don't want to give away too much, and I tend to have very complicated plots that weave in and out. But yeah, so they end up together, trapped, and have to learn to be allies, not only against this outside evil, but also against some of the political plotting that is going on with her father. And they hit it off, as romance characters do. And
what are their names?
Her name is Helena. She's the Militess of the book. So it's the Militess and Mage series. Her name is, she is a lord in her own right. And his name is Gethin. And he is a necromancer and the most powerful mage in their world. And he's, funny enough, a vegetarian.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't find a lot of those in books.
Which was just a weird little quirky thing that happened. I was like, oh, what the hell? That's kind of funny.
Right, we'll go with it.
Vegetarian necromancer. Okay.
Yeah, the whole idea with him is that he does not He is a necromancer because he was brought into this type of magic as a child. It wasn't something that he wanted to do. He was forced into it. And so he tries to practice his magic with the least amount of damage to the animals and people around him.
So in your stories, and that means a necromonger is bad, because I've seen some that weren't. That it wasn't black magic.
He is capable of very evil magic, but he tries to do good. He's actually a healer. So he uses his black magic to destroy illness.
Okay.
Rather than destroying people and animals. His predecessors were all very destructive. And so he's not trusted because of this position he holds. Not because he's a nasty, nasty person. Although he is capable of some rather unpleasant things.
Of course, they all have to be. You said that you've been writing since 2012, correct?
Yes.
How would you say your writing speed is? Like if someone was to pick up one of your books and wanted the next in the series, how fast would you say that they would get the next in the series?
I write very slowly, actually. I'm lucky if I can get out a novel a year. I'm trying to get that up to two a year, but so far it hasn't worked out. I'm a perfectionist. And I tend to need downtime with my work. So I can turn out a first draft fairly quickly, but that first draft needs a lot of editing work, and I need to put it aside for long periods of time to stew on that back burner.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I've been trying to do is get out a novel a year and then trying to get out more short stories to kind of pad in between. But sometimes it takes me a while to come up with an idea, really, even in a world that's established that I know, with characters that I know, it can take me a while to really find my way around a plot that feels satisfying.
Sorry. I want to know what, like when you put it on the back burner and you stew instead of working on another book, what do you tend to do?
I actually do tend to work on other things. So I might work on another novel that's going on. I might work on short stories, the bane of all of our lives, marketing. That's something I'm trying to get better at. Trying to get a better attitude about marketing.
Yeah, I'm not.
I love marketing. No, I don't.
I'm trying, but it's not there yet. So what do you find the best way to interact with your readers?
Facebook. Facebook is where I find most of my readers are actively looking to be involved with me and other authors. I don't like Twitter. I have not liked Twitter for a long time. It's just so full of advertising and I don't know. Trying to weed through Twitter makes my head want to explode. So Facebook, I have started pursuing a newsletter more actively and growing that. But that's really just been this year that I've been working on that, and I feel like really only the last 6 months am I getting some traction with that.
Okay.
I think that's a long haul kind of process.
Yeah, to get it to where you have the people who actually open it. Yeah.
Yes.
Well.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have to not like open the report and see all the people who unsubscribed and be like, oh, I'm so sad. They hate me.
It's okay. Because I'm now down to, every time I send out a newsletter, I only get 2 or 3 unsubscribed. So
that's good.
It gets better.
Yeah.
I need to turn off the feature where it emails me every time someone unsubscribes, so I know every time that happens.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of depressing.
That would be crazy. So what's your favorite genre to read?
Oh, I actually don't have a favorite genre to read. I read a lot. I don't read a lot, but I read widely. So right now I'm reading, well, I read every night to my daughter. She's 11, but I want to be able to read more older age work with her. So that's one of the things that we've continued to do, even though she's reading like a college level in terms of comprehension. So we're reading a series by, I'm going to butcher this poor woman's name, Cinda Williams Chima or Kima. I'm not sure how you pronounce her last name, Chima. And it's actually really interesting. It's fantasy and it's YA. For myself, I watched The Night Manager and just absolutely loved that. And I'd never read any of John le Carré's work, so I'm reading spy novel. I'm actually reading The Night Manager and finding his writing really compelling.
Have you ever read any Tom Clancy?
I haven't. I've had a lot of people tell me I should, and so I'm going to add that to my list.
I'm only asking because you said you want to read books, to your daughter who's a little bit more advanced.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was in 6th grade when I read The Hunt for the Red October, and then I went back and devoured all the rest of his books.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
His books are you can understand them at that age, even though my teacher took the book from me and told my mom I needed something age appropriate.
That's so annoying.
Well, my mom made her sit down and ask me about the book, and I knew, so she gave it back. But I think that those books are very. It stimulates your mind.
Yeah,
so absolutely. Might be fun to read.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good idea. I will ask her if she'd be interested in that. She's really into fantasy and science fiction right now. We've read
well, it's science, not fiction, but it's science.
Yeah, true. We've read Ursula K. Le Guin, her Earthsea series. Those are fabulous. I really love that woman's writing.
I've seen them. I haven't read them. I've seen them.
Joe Abercrombie is another author whose work I like and who doesn't write like romantic work. He writes very dark. He's kind of the father of the grim dark subgenre.
Does your reading tend to more the dark side?
Yeah, I think so. I must have a negative view of the world or something.
I've read a few dark, what is it called? Books lately.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need to kind of have that little sunshine blocked out for a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just, maybe it's that classical literature background. I'm used to seeing Shakespeare killing everybody. It's just like, what are you?
Sorry. My cat's eating one of my bracelets.
Oh, I kind of thought there might be a cat involved in that.
No, I get bracelets come from the Philippines. My friends bring them back. Well, sometimes I'll take them off and just put them on the dresser, and he threw it on the floor and started chewing on it.
Yep.
Cats.
It looks delicious.
That's funny. You knew it was a cat, though.
I did. I know that. That's like, I'm going to kill a cat now. I got two.
Yeah, listen. They just put their ears back and look at you like, no, I'm the boss. Stupid.
I'm not a sunshine and roses kind of reader. I want some real meat in my books. Funny enough, I actually don't read traditional romance at all.
Like, is traditional, you mean by what is it called?
Like commercial.
I'm
blanking out on the
Harlequin or
contemporary.
That's the word that was bouncing around in my head. And what
there's a C in there. Yeah, no, contemporary romance. I don't read it at all. I've read some historical romance occasionally. I will read. Most of my reading does go along the lines of science fiction and fantasy, particularly fantasy. And then, like I said, I'm now interested in
time travel.
I haven't gotten into the time travel thing. I don't know why.
That's so beautiful.
I know it's weird. I have so many books on my little phone.
How big is your to read list? I don't have one, so I'm always interested in other people's.
You don't have one
fast
because
I read.
A million books a day.
I don't know how many books I have on my iPhone. It hasn't rejected me yet and said, I'm running out of space or anything, but I always buy them intending to read them immediately. I'm lucky in that I have some friends who have been giving me their books lately to read. And like I have Vicky Stiefels' Chest of Stone that I started reading, and she's a wonderful writer. She writes more contemporary fantasy romance. And I have Grace Draven's short story from the anthology that she just released.
I love Grace.
I know, she's so sweet too. She's so sweet. The Darkest Midnight. That's her short story. So I have that waiting for me to read also.
What's your last binge read?
I think it was Joe Abercrombie. But you know, it's weird because since I read to my daughter every night, that often will take my reading time. And then I have to decide, am I going to read, or am I going to write, or am I going to do work, or I'm going to sleep. I don't sleep that much.
My mom used to read to us every night, and I kind of, you know, I liked it. She read up until the time I went away to college because I had younger siblings.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So it's good. It's fun.
It is. It's an opportunity. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's an opportunity to introduce her to fiction that's a little more advanced in terms of emotions and violence and sex and, you know, things like that, you know, she's not going to get in her classroom book. So,
and I think that also that's why we had a higher reading level, because I remember when I got to 6th grade is when they start reading Boxcar Children. I'm looking at the kids like that when I was in 3rd grade.
My daughter hates those books.
But when I was in 3rd grade, I devoured the whole series, and I was like, yes, and I was excited. And I get to 6th grade, and they're like, we're gonna read this today. I'm like, we're gonna read what?
You're like, can we read Tom Clancy, please?
I was like, can I just go out and sit on a quad and read whatever I want? Because what? And, you know, so I think maybe that helped us a lot with the whole, when my mom read to us, because we start developing faster. And she also dropped us off at the library. Told us, stay there for Saturday, I'll pick you up later.
Nice. Smart mom.
The library.
Go ahead, sorry.
The library was my favorite place in junior high.
Still my favorite place.
Definitely. I am within walking distance of a library. We're in our little rental house now, which is thrilling.
It's sad how they've gone by the wayside. Not like in terms of, you know, now everybody goes and everybody's on computers. It used to be you can look down the aisles and people were like on the sides and everybody was reading, and now everybody's like, I'm like, dude, go home and do that because now I'm So I mean, it's funny how it's changed so much, and I'm like, but I still walk in and I'm just like, okay, let's go browse the books just to see what we have.
Oh yeah.
Even though I read almost every single book I see, but still, you know.
Yeah, one of my favorite places when I was in college was going into the stacks at UCLA's Powell Library. It was just, it was amazing. You just walk in and you're like, there's so much history and knowledge here. I want to touch it all.
Quiet.
It was so quiet.
Especially in a college library.
I love it. I love the college libraries. Every college library just has they're just fabulous.
I grew up in the dorm. I mean, I grew up, but I wasn't really escaping. They're like, oh, we know where Paulina is. So, you know, they always need to find me in the library, 7th floor. There, it's peaceful. Works. What do you consider contemporary fantasy? I actually never heard of it, or I probably read it and just don't know what it is.
It's like urban fantasy. It's most of the paranormal romance, I think, is contemporary fantasy. It's, you know, it's set in the here and now. It probably
kind of like the old vampire who's 500, 600, 700 years old who now lives here, that kind of thing.
Yeah, or witches that now live here, or ghosts, or you know, you've got the paranormal investigators working with some sort of government organization.
That's considered contemporary fantasy?
I think so.
Huh. I have a new genre.
I thought that was kind of shown under paranormal romance.
I think so. Yeah.
But they probably just have to break it all down, because at this point, if you just say paranormal romance and put that into any kind of search and Amazon, Barnes and Noble, you're gonna get like 100,000.
A million.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a are you looking for something that's more urban fantasy, that's lighter on romance, or are you looking for something that is a little heavier on romance? It all seems contemporary though to me in the setting. So that's why I tend to lump it together. That's just me. I don't think that you would find it listed on any sales sites that way. That's just me being
Right.
weird.
I agree with that because I have a hard time explaining to people that I write secondary world fantasy, and they're like, well, what is that? I'm like, well, anything that doesn't take place on Earth, it's Earth-like, but it's not Earth. And they're like, oh, because there's so many things getting crammed into paranormal, urban fantasy, that it's, yeah, I like contemporary fantasy for urban and paranormal, because anything that takes place in the world as we know it with just added magic, it makes sense that we call it contemporary fantasy.
Yeah, yeah,
That's true.
yeah.
Maybe it'll take off as a category.
Oh, and everybody can credit me and still not buy my books.
We'll see.
Well, why don't we have a giveaway for our podcast listeners? You've agreed to give away a copy of Shadow in the Sun, which is book 1 in your Militess series, correct?
Yes, the Militess Mage series.
Okay, so in order to be entered for a chance to win an ebook copy of Shadow in the Sun, you need to leave a comment on this podcast. You can find our podcast on focusonfantasyromance.wordpress.com. This is episode number 56, so leave a comment and ask Monica a question. We will leave the giveaway open for 30 days, so January 9, we'll close it. Can't believe it's, yeah.
Crazy. I can't believe we're in 2018.
I know. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a lot of fun to hang out with you
Yeah, I
guys.
had a lovely time. And listeners, if you like the podcast, please like, comment, and share. This has been episode number 56. Good night.
Night.
Bye. Thank you.